Welcome to Kadam, the Small Steps podcast, where we try to showcase individual perspectives of recent graduates about different pathways of life. I'm Arjit Singh, and today, once again, I will try to uncover what it means to have a traditional career. After months of being out of podcasting and out of practice, I'm back, trying to get the show running again. Even though I've been out of this for a little bit, this show has never been out of my mind. I still believe that this can help various folks learn more about either an industry that they want to get into or one that they don't have much experience with. We haven't changed this much since the last time you saw me on this podcast. I've been learning new things, as I am sure you all have too. I'm sure since the last time you heard me talk, whether that was yesterday or months ago, you have had various new experiences. Our lives haven't stopped. The world hasn't stopped. It's time for season two, and it's time for many more exciting guests and conversations. We're still living with masks on, but that's not to hinder us from looking for a brighter future. And with that hope, I'd like to introduce to you today's guest, someone that wants to design medical and assistive devices to help people live better and happier lives. Today's guest is someone who chose to get into a field of study that imitated one of her mom. She grew up watching her mother and loved seeing all the work her mother did and created. She got into art and engineering at an early age and an amalgamation of what she has used to succeed through college with an honors in industrial design. Since her short span after graduating, she has worked for multiple firms already, designing 3D environments, signage, and wayfindings, and now works at Benson Integrated Marketing Solutions in Alpharetta, Georgia, doing environmental graphic designs. Let's welcome Mackenzie Letherby and discuss all this and how she plans to take more small steps to fulfill her dreams. Welcome to the show, Mackenzie. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. So, what's Alpharetta, Georgia been like?
Well, I guess I'm not technically working in Alpharetta because I'm working from home, which
Oh,
has been
true.
which has been nice because there's no commute. I just wake up, walk into my office, and so I'm actually enjoying working from home a lot better. I went into the office my first day on the job, and I'm glad I don't have to go in every day. It's a 45-minute drive, so
Okay, yeah,
happy to
that's
work
quite a drive. Yeah.
from home. Yes.
No, this place that I've been working with right now too, like I almost drive an hour and a half one way, and so like I almost drive all day, I feel like, and it's
I know it
crazy.
just takes up too much of your day, and then it's just like you can't do things you want to do outside of work
Right.
because you're like, oh, I have to go drive for 2 hours out of my day.
Yeah, it's not the best feeling, definitely. But do you like the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's not what I expected I would be doing. But that's not to say like I can't grow within the company. I think they're starting to get um like they're just starting to grow into a different part that I think I'd be more interested in, which is good. When I first started, it was just one company, and now they're starting to like branch out into other sectors. So we're getting into sports, and that's just always something I've been interested in. Growing up with a brother, and we've just always been a big sports family, and so I don't know. I think it'll be fun to get into that. We just did like a big project for the Georgia State Stadium in Atlanta,
That's
um,
awesome.
and stuff like that. So we've been hiring more and more people that are like kind of in that sports sector. Um,
Okay.
and I don't know, I think that'll be fun to get into. Other than that, we do mostly like multifamily housing, like apartment complexes, um, like hotels, like stuff like that, where, you need to have the unit ID outside the door and like stuff like that. So we do all that wayfinding where like directionals, future resident parking signs, like everything you look at, like I swear every time I go into a parking deck now, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's what I do every day. Like I
Correct.
set up those signs, I design those signs. So it's fun seeing like all of that in real life because you don't really realize how needed that kind of stuff is until you're the one putting it together every day and designing it. And then you see it in real life and you're like, oh, I do need to know that. So
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think with that, like whenever you get out of the house, it's almost just like it's a playground for you, and it's something that you can learn from. Everywhere you see, there's going to be signs and wayfindings and all kinds of stuff. So I think you're
Yeah,
always learning, even when you're not really at work, which is really, really interesting. So,
yeah, doing that, getting inspiration like anywhere I go. It's
yeah,
inspiration
exactly.
job.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, have you always wanted to get into something like that, or was it just like a path that you had to take? What was that like?
So
Yeah.
I think it's more of a path I had to take. In college, I always kind of imagined doing something different. Like when I was looking for jobs and all that kind of stuff, I was like, oh, I'll work for a firm so I can kind of decide, like an industrial design firm, so I can kind of decide like what type of products I wanted to design. And I always imagined it more being like product based. Like I was going to be designing products that people were going to be using, not so much like people use what I design, but in just like in a different manner and aspect. So I always thought it'd be more like hands-on. Just I just thought it would be different. But I guess that's like one of the good things about industrial design is like there's so many different things you can do with it, and like you can apply all of your knowledge that you learned in school to so many different things. So I mean, I think as we all know, it's hard to find a job like right out of college. Like they're looking for so much experience that like we don't have. Like, yeah, we have sponsored studios that we have in college, so we're working with other companies and like we're getting that experience there. But like sometimes companies look at that and they don't think it's experience, like they don't take it as job experience.
Correct. Yes.
Like I think we learned a lot from it and that helped us in our education, but like when it comes to actual jobs, it's I don't know, like it's hard to compare that to something like an internship or and like that's also hard to get.
Right.
So and like
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to be in Atlanta just because
Hmm.
it's a big city and I thought it would have a lot of opportunities for me starting out. And so I started looking for jobs there, and it was just it's a whole mess of like trying to find a job is just a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think you had an internship, during college as well, right? I think, or was it right out of school? How was
Yeah,
that?
it was a summer after. So that's kind of like how
Okay.
I got into what I do now.
Okay.
Which was like I was very lucky to find this internship, and it was with a very small firm who did like signage wayfinding. And I liked it, but I think it was just like it was such short term, like it was just a summer. So like I learned a lot, which I'm thankful for now, especially being in the job I am in now. But it was just like not the environment I wanted. It was like a 5 people firm, like it was in like a little house, so it just didn't feel very like office like or like business like. And then I don't know, I just felt like I wasn't getting into it enough for me to enjoy it. Like I wasn't having like the creative freedom I wanted to be able to enjoy it. And so like it became close to the end of the summer, and I knew either they're going to try to offer me a job or I was going to have to go find something else, like if they didn't
Mm,
offer me the job.
right.
And I just started thinking more and more about like if I could see myself working there like long term. And it just like wasn't the place for me. Like I'm very thankful for the experience I got there, but it just wasn't for me. So please stop.
And that's your coworkers now. So
Yeah,
that's that's
she,
still creative freedom, isn't it? That's more than what you
yeah,
had
that's where I
earlier,
get
right?
my inspiration is the dog speaks from the toys.
Right.
But like at the end of the summer, I was basically like, okay, I'm just gonna start applying for jobs if it's meant to be, and I want to work somewhere else or I get a job somewhere else, like I'll go there. Or if
Hmm.
I'm meant to work here for a little bit, like I don't know, I just felt like I needed to be flexible because I was like not running out of opportunities, but it's just like when I get an opportunity, like I want to like roll with it.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't want to like take advantage of like learning so much from them and then like just being like, okay, bye, like I'm leaving, I'm going somewhere else.
Right.
But I guess that's just like internships, like that can happen. So
Yeah.
that's just part of it. So I just started applying for jobs, and I mean, I applied to so many jobs. I was constantly applying to jobs. Like fixing my resume, fixing my portfolio and all of that. And which is like, that takes so much work. Like people don't realize how much work you have to put into that. And like, especially for designers, and like showcasing your work in a manner that is going to be like appealing to other people is hard, because you look at it and you're like, oh, I like what I just
Not
did.
too
And I
bad,
like the way
right?
I set it up. And I like the
Yeah.
way I told my story through this, but
Hmm.
it can be seen completely different through somebody else's eyes. So,
Right.
I feel like I was just like constantly catering to like, oh, I'm going to work at it. Like I'm applying to like a design firm. Oh, I'm going to do this. But if I'm applying to like an architecture firm, like I'm going to try to like kind of gear it more towards building, or like it's hard because as a designer, you can go to so many different places, but you have to showcase your talents in different ways to be able to like tell them that you can work there,
Right. Right. Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I ended up getting a job with a company in Kennesaw, Georgia, which is like just north of Atlanta.
Okay.
And I was doing 3D environments design. So we were mostly doing like trade show booths, which was like fun because it like entailed so much branding for different companies. And like, it was always like, I liked it because it was like a large scale 3D. I was like working really well with my 3D modeling skills that I had learned in college. And I was learning new 3D modeling software. So it was just like, I constantly felt like I was learning more and more, which I really liked.
Yeah, and I think
And
that's, sorry, go ahead. Keep
no,
going.
go ahead.
I was just saying, I mean, I think that's even more hands-on as well, so with the 3D prototypes and 3D I think just the environments, I think it's still more tactical, there are things that you can actually, walk around and things like that. So with wayfindings and signage that you're doing now, or that you had done in your previous internship, I think it's still more 2D. And so, getting into that 3D world was really what you wanted to do. And so I
Yeah.
think the environments would have helped.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was definitely an important like path along my my journey, but I mean, I've only been working for like almost 2 years. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I still have a lot left to go, which is great because I feel like in my first 2 years, I've learned so much already that like it's only the beginning. But yeah, I think like the 3D aspect of it like helped me in my job now, even though I'm doing more 2D things. Like I'm always thinking in a 3D perspective,
Hmm.
like literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just, and the other people I work with, sometimes they think more 2D based because they're like trained, educated graphic designers. So I think it kind of like puts an edge on me, like being able to like think in like the 3D, and like some of them don't know how to use the 3D modeling. So like that's been something I've been able to like bring to my company. Um, so I mean, like just learning and taking the things that I've learned from my past jobs and being able to bring it to this new one and like kind of put a spin on more traditionally 2D things has been like interesting and fun. So
Yeah. And so I think one question that comes up from the things that you mentioned about, changing your portfolios and resumes and kind of catering them towards the specific jobs that you were applying to. Um, since your mom is also in this this career, did you often either ask for advice from her, or did you have other mentors that you were asking? So did you get in touch with architects, or let's say other graphic designers, or things that, or jobs that you were kind of going for, so when you were applying for them, did you ask those people? Because you said that initially when you look at it, your portfolio, and you're like, okay, that's great, I'm going to turn that in. But then, when you have another set of eyes look at it, whether that is a designer or not, if it's somebody in the industry that's related to what you're applying to, I think it can help. Is
yeah,
that something that you did, and how did that help?
I definitely looked to my mom for not so much like it was more like I did what I wanted to do and then like made it how I wanted to look. And then I was like, hey mom, look at this. What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What can I fix? Um, and then like it's hard because when she went through college and she was applying for jobs, nothing was digital. Everything
Correct.
was all on paper,
Mm-hmm.
your resume, your portfolio, like everything. You're taking this huge binder into your job interviews and you're physically flipping through pages. And like there's something about that that I love, just
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, we're so hands-on, like during our jobs, like it's almost cool to like put this huge thing together, like, and be like, oh, like this is that. And like, don't get me wrong, it's so nice to be able to do it digital now, because like you can constantly change it. You don't have to reprint 100 pages or however many pages it is. And I think there's great things about it all being digital now, that's like you can just send it off, and like so many people can look at it, so many people can look at your website, and it's just like
Correct.
people constantly visit my website just from like LinkedIn, and it's just like cool that you get to share that so easily.
Right.
And I think my mom definitely helped me like more of like the storytelling part, because I think that's the hardest part of it. It's like I have all of this work, but like how am I gonna tell people like all the work that went into this one project that we were working on for 6 weeks, or like whatever, how long it was.
Yeah.
So she was definitely really helpful. Other than that, I feel like I'm like kind of stubborn asking for help from like other people, because
Okay.
I'm like, I trust and respect my mom's opinion. And if like, well, just because like she's a designer and she's my
Right.
mom, but
Yeah.
it's just hard to like, I don't know if it's like shy or stubborn, but like if somebody tells me that they don't like it, I'm like, well, why don't you like it? Like, you put it together, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of just like relied on myself and like being confident in what I had and like my work. And I think that's like so hard to do, because for the longest time I was like scared to show people my work, because like you're not confident in it, but it's just like, oh, like what if you don't like it? But I
Right.
think like as I got like through college and like started applying to jobs, it's like, okay, no, y'all are gonna be lucky to have me. Like I should be wanting to show you my work. Like
Right.
it's just part of like the pride of like being able, or like being confident in yourself and like what you bring to the table.
Yeah.
And like I think sometimes that can be hard to learn, and I definitely struggled with that at first, but I feel like now I'm starting to like get out of that and like
Yeah.
showcase my work more, which is nice.
Yeah, and I think that goes both ways. Just the fact that sometimes you don't want to show that work to everybody, but then you do want to show it to people that can actually help, and they want to
Right.
help. I think there's the want factor is them wanting to do it, because then there's some
Right.
people that just come in and they're like, okay, that's trash, and then that kind of brings you down a little bit too. And I think that can definitely be hard, and finding the balance of finding the right people, I think, is really, really important. Because I
Yeah.
mean, I'm the kind of person that I when I show my work to somebody, I'm like, okay, I want to defend it, right? And like you
Yeah.
said, I want to tell them, okay, why don't you like it, kind of thing. But at the same time, I want them to tear it down. I want them to be like,
Like
hey, I don't
constructive
like that.
criticism. Yeah.
Exactly. And I want them to tell me why. Like I'll ask 100 questions if they don't like something, because that makes me understand, okay, this is a specific thing that I need to fix. And when
Yeah.
they can explain it, then I think it gives me reason, or enough reason, to be able to say that, that's something that I need to change. And so
Yeah.
I think that that's definitely a balance that needs to be found when kind of showing your work to somebody and getting it either, criticized, or getting it just put on a throne, because some people
Yeah.
are just like, how can you do that? That's crazy.
I think that's like an important part of being a designer, is like showing it and like getting your work turned down, or like someone saying like, I don't like that, or that's not
Yeah.
good. It's like you grow so much from that.
Right.
And it's important to do that. And I think we got a lot of that in college. So I'm like very thankful that we did, because
Right.
we were able to get advice from like our professors and stuff like that, and be able to show them. And some of them were really hard on us, and but I
Hmm.
think we wouldn't be who we are now if we didn't get that,
Right.
because it made us grow as designers, it made us grow as people. And I think that's part of why, like as we got older, and or like in when we were juniors and seniors, and we were
Hmm.
doing more of the like studio, and we were actually presenting to clients and like stuff like that, like that just makes you grow as a person, like being able to talk in front of people, being able to present, and like
Right.
getting that feedback is like great. But
Yeah.
I don't know, now I think like you said, it's just finding the right people, because in college you're given these people, like your professors are automatically going to be who you talk to and who you're getting advice from,
Right.
like the clients. But I think like once you're working, it's sometimes hard to find that person that you trust to give their opinion, and like you respect their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like I've kind of found that like at my new job. Like there's a girl who's like 5 years older than me, but she's, you know, she's worked at several different firms, and she's just like just so smart in what she does. And I really started to respect her opinion. And like the more and more like I start calling her and I'm like, hey, like what do you think about this design? And like
Right.
we've just been doing that back and forth, so it's like it's become we respect each other's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's been nice to like learn from somebody like that, where she's still like young enough where I'm like, you know, like I get along with her really well on a personal
Right.
level, but we also can get together and just brainstorm and put our ideas together and like go back and forth on what we can do to each other's designs to, you know, like enhance them. So
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's definitely something that I think we've talked about in the last season of this podcast too, is, you know, being able to find the right mentors, being able to find the right people, and being able to find them at the company that you're working with. Sometimes it's so important, because when you do that, when you find those people at the company that you're with, it just elevates just your experience of being there and the experience that you're also gaining, you know? And so when
yeah,
you take that further into life and into another company or into something that you're going to do on your own, I think you bring so much with that, because
right,
one, you have the connection that, you know, years from now you're going to call and still be able to talk to about work that you're producing. But also, I think just the advice that you've already gotten is something that gets engraved into your mind, and it's something that you take along for the rest of the journey. So
definitely.
definitely very, very important. So let's switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about medical devices and how that's something that you've been, I think, interested in since you were a kid, and always wanted to design, and how you plan to either get there, or how you have changed your career and you think that you're maybe not as interested in that anymore.
Yeah, so that's always been something I've been interested in like for as long as I can remember. So like I grew up going to meetings with my mom, like if she couldn't find a babysitter when I was young and like I wasn't in school yet. And
Mm-hmm.
like I just remember like sitting there and being like, well, she designed baby toys, it's just like obviously different, but the
Yeah.
company she worked for was awesome. And like I'd always just like color in her sketches and like, you know, like I would do stuff like that. So I was from
Right.
a very young age, I was like sitting in these meetings and learning like all this stuff, which is like it's just funny to look back on now. Like when I'm sitting in meetings, I'm like, I can't believe my mom like brought me to this.
That's
Like
crazy. I mean, it's just time difference, right?
I know. I was like,
Yeah.
I guess I was just like quiet, sitting, just coloring. So
Yeah.
um and I think that's where it started, that I was like, oh, it'd be fun to work in a firm because you can work on so many different things. And like as I got older, I started working with people who have disabilities, and like my church was like huge into that. We had like a huge program, and then we had like a huge summer camp, and I always involved myself in that, and I loved it. And it's just like those people are amazing, and then there's so many things that they need that aren't currently adapted to like their needs. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that's kind of where I got started with like the medical device, or like it's assistive technology more. And like I don't know, I just think during college I always was like, oh, it'd be so fun to do like medical device. My dad works in hospitals, and like I don't know, it's just always been something I've been interested in. But it's just like that sector is just very hard to get into. I've learned more and more, like when you're applying to jobs or when you're looking for jobs, like that's not something that every firm does. And then the ones that do are in very specific locations. So like me knowing I wanted to be in Atlanta, it was hard to find that specific thing. I would apply to jobs, not hear back from anybody. I would apply to internships. I would just ask to meet with people, like just no responses. And like that's so hard to just not even get a no or a yes. It's just like a nothing. So like at that point when I was trying to look for an internship, like I was just even like messaging designers on LinkedIn, like, hey, like I know like you're probably not gonna be able to give me a job, but would you be willing to meet so I can just like talk to you about your experience in this industry, or like just get some advice of like how they started out. Like it's hard to start out, and getting people's opinions that are going to be or like who are in your shoes but later down the road is like helpful. And like it was hard to get people to do that. And so I think that kind of like the medical device assistive technology kind of got put on the back burner, and I was more like, I just need a job. Like I graduated and I want to make money and I want to get my foot in the door somewhere. So that's kind of why I just like took whatever internship, took whatever job kind of just came at me, because I was like, okay, worst comes to worst, I'm learning something here that I can hopefully take somewhere else, and then making money, which is important. And then I don't know, like it just kind of got further and further away from being attainable like right now. And if I think about it now and be like, yeah, like I would love to get to that point again, but I'm like, now I feel like I'm on like the whole opposite end of the spectrum of like what I'm designing. And so I'm like, it's hard to figure out what I would want to, or like how I would get back to that point. So I feel like that's kind of where I'm at now, but I'm also like, the more and more I like work at a company, I'm like, the more and more I want to do something on my own. Like the more and more I want to be my own boss, the more and more like I want to figure out something to do on my own and not be my baby. Like I want to create something and put my work into it. And so maybe that's something that is medical device, like a thing I create, or I don't know if it's more like experience like driven, like I don't know what that is yet, but I don't know, I feel like things have kind of switched, but I could so easily like go back into that if I was given the chance.
Yeah, and don't take this wrong way, and you don't have to answer that. But since you mentioned some of that during this survey that we did earlier, you mentioned some things about being in the hospital, or being going through just a lot of different sickness and health issues during college, and going through that. Did that maybe even push you more, or push you wanting to get that more, like wanting to get into this industry more, like into the assistive or just like health industry even more? Or did that hinder that, some of those experiences? So you can share, whether you're at a hospital or something like that and something happened, then you wanted to look at a product and you wanted to change it, or something like that. Was that something that ever happened, or any experiences like that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had my fair share of doctors visits and hospital visits in college, and even now, just like figuring out some health issues, and like that was hard to do school and like be in an intensive program like ours, and deal with that kind of stuff. And so I think, and sometimes it would really make me push myself to want to do that, because I'm like, I can't imagine like people who live in the hospital because they're so sick, or like when they're at home, they have all these different things attached to them and they need to be, treated all like 24/7. They always need to be having medicines administered and like all of this stuff. There's so many things that you can look at in a hospital or a doctor's office, or even like at home medical equipment, that is just like, that just makes it hard for the people who are using it. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement in a lot of those things. And I mean, I think just going through that stuff, it made me want to better that industry. Not that it's like bad, but there's just like things that just could like not like, it could just look more aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's I always, so where I'm from in Michigan, there's a company called Stryker, and it's
Hmm.
like a huge medical device company, and they make like the hospital beds and like the rolling carts and the wheelchairs and like all this stuff, and it's super cool, and they've gotten it way better than it used to be. But it's just
Hmm.
like, you can see how much it changed from this ugly like metal bed that
Yeah.
with masks on it to like what they look like now.
Hmm.
And like, I guess I understand that they're always going to need to look like somewhat medical, or like,
Yeah.
like
But I mean,
technology.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think they do need to look good too, because when you're in a hospital, I think you need the positive vibes from whatever you can get, you know? And
Yeah,
so if things look aesthetically pleasing, it just kind of brings, I don't know if it happens to everybody, you know, us as designers, I think we see that and we're like, okay, if it's a cool looking bed, all right, it's a cool looking bed, you know, but I don't
yeah,
think everybody
I can
thinks like that.
appreciate
Right.
that.
And I don't think everybody you know, everybody appreciates that. I mean, like, you know, as we talked in school too, if we see a delicious radii, you know, as our professor would say, we see one and if we appreciate one, but I don't think everybody does that. So did you maybe like try to research why some of those things look like the way they did, and did you maybe even try to redesign some of that? Like, was that something that you ever tried to do or do research on?
Um, Not as much. I mean, I would definitely like look at something and be like, oh, like that. Like there's some idea there, and
Right,
like a lot of times it would just be like when I'm busy with something else, so it'd be hard to like step back and be like, okay, I'm gonna put in extra time to figure this out on top
right.
of what I'm already doing.
Yeah.
I think I find myself in that scenario so many times because I'm like, oh, I want to invent something, like I want to design something cool, like I want to get there, but it's just so hard to do that. Like
Yeah.
when you're already working
Yeah.
or you're already in school and then like you want to have a social life and you want to balance all these things. Doing that is just like an extra step and like sometimes it's worth it. If you have an idea and you can take it to the next level and you can work it on that way, that's great. But a lot of times I'm like, oh, I have an idea, I'm gonna write it down, and then it stays written down on the paper. So,
Mhm.
like maybe one day like I should go back and, you know, like make something out of one of my ideas, but
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, a lot of people I think mentioned this during the initial stages of COVID and conferences that I initially saw and, you know, was a part of. I was listening to people saying a lot of these things of, you know, if you're not doing this right now during this time of COVID, if you don't have a job, you know, like if you're not doing the things that you really wanted to do for the past I don't know how many years, you know, if you're not doing them now, you never really wanted to do them, you know. That was one thing. And then other than that, I've also seen, you know, how you mentioned just like working from home, and I think that's something that looks easy, but I think it's a little bit harder, you know. It's actually when you're working from home, there's just so much going on sometimes that you need to
yeah,
balance everything, you know. And so we talked to one of our guests last time too about making that separate space inside the home where you are just working. And you know, like you mentioned, you have that office space designated inside your house, and that's something that, you know, you appreciate probably, you know, instead of sitting at your dining table and doing that. But at the same time, I think sometimes you get called into meetings at weird hours or whatever, you know. And
yeah,
so if you're doing the research and you really want to be doing something else and designing a different product, sometimes you just don't get the time with full-time jobs. And people, you know, sometimes don't appreciate it. But at the same time, you know, like I work for this company too that or these people, you know, that wanted to form a company, and they were trying to make this product, and I designed for them when I was still in school too. But you know, due to COVID, I think the production of the product really just took a blow. And I'm not like I've been trying to get in touch with them again and see where the product is, because you know they went through the entire initial design process with another designer after I gave them the initial idea too. But it's just not like there has been hindrances where the product is not already launched, you know. Initially I think it had to be something that went out for 2020, but it hasn't happened yet. So that's
yeah,
something that's, you know, being pushed back, and plans do get pushed back. I think that's always going to happen. But again, you know, one of these days, hopefully something that you have written down is going to turn into something that, you know, you're going to be happy about. And
yeah,
hopefully, I think, I mean, this is one question that I want to bring up with all my guests this season is making sure that what they're doing is making them happy, you know. And so what would you like to say about that? Because I know that you mentioned, you know, like them not being 3D products, but at the same time, you also mentioned going into the medical industry, but also you said that you want to make these products more aesthetically pleasing. But I think you're already doing the aesthetically pleasing job with the wayfindings, so I think that aspect of those things you can still translate into the 3D side of things, and then possibly move into the medical side of things as well in the future. So what would you say about how you feel doing what you do right now? Like, is what are your happiness levels, if you may?
Yeah, I think, I mean, doing something that makes you happy is like so important, like if not one of the most important things in your life. Like if you're not happy doing what you're working, or like you're on your job, like that's just making you miserable.
Yep.
And I think it's important to like differentiate doing something that doesn't make you happy, and
Correct.
then doing something that you might not like now, but when you look back on it, it's going to be an important part of your life and you're learning from it.
Right.
So I feel like that's kind of where I am now. I don't think I want to be doing what I'm doing now forever.
Hmm.
Like I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
There are parts of my jobs that I do love. And when I get to be like, when I get to have creative freedom, and like when I'm creating concepts, like I'm like, okay, yeah, like this is good to go.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying my day, or like I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Like I get to be like have fun and be creative and play around with color and shapes and like all that. Like I love that. And then there's parts of it where I'm like, okay, like what, like how can I make the best out of what I'm not enjoying out of my job? How can I
Right.
turn this into something that I know down the road is going to be helpful to me? Like, what am I learning
Hmm.
out of the situation? And I think that's been like one of my biggest takeaways of doing something, or like learning from my job, is just like being positive and taking it as a learning experience, and just like trying to figure out what I can take and use in the future. Um, yeah, I think like working at home too, like you said, you feel like you're never off the job. Like I feel like I'm always expected to be answering emails. If it's 9 p.m. at night and somebody emails me, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go walk into my office and reply to the email or do whatever the email says, which is hard. It creates, or doesn't create, a difference between work and home. And that's hard. But I think it's just like putting boundaries on like when you reply, and making that, like you have to make that balance for yourself.
Right.
And so like I feel like now that I've been working at this company for a while, like I feel like I'm not like, oh, I'm the new girl, so like I have to reply. Like I'm kind of like starting
Hmm.
to stand up for myself, and like, okay, it's after, like sometimes I work later than 5, but like just because we're busy. But like it's, oh, if it's after 5, like okay, go have dinner, go work out, go do what you want to do, go do what you need to do. And then like if you really feel like this is a pressing topic
Hmm.
or whatever task, then okay, you could do it. But a lot of times people just email you at night because they think about it,
Yeah.
and then they're going to forget the next morning, so they just go ahead and email you. So like
Right.
I've had several times where I go do these things and I reply, and then like they're like, oh, I didn't mean for you to do that right now. I'm like, well, then
Yeah.
why'd you email me,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's just like creating that balance for yourself. I will say like having my own office is like why I like working from home so much. If I was, like you said, if I was working from my couch or my dining room table, I think I'd be ready to be back in the office. But because
Yeah.
I've created space for me, it's like this is my space where I get to be creative, and like I do some of my own stuff in here, and then like I work in here. Like I
Yeah.
do like my own creative stuff. And I think like working from home has made me make the switch of wanting to do something myself, like wanting to
Right.
create a business or whatever that is. I think it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm like making time for my work already, but I get to be at home. So it's like the best of both worlds. So I'm like, this makes me want to be my own boss, makes me want to like set my own times to work on things. So yeah, I'm like, I'm happy at my work, but I think I could be happier. that's a good way to put it. I don't know.
Yeah, we can always be happier. I think we can always, and we
Right.
always strive for more. And that's definitely a good, place to leave that. But, you know, uh, I think, I think it was a podcast that I was listening to too, and they talked about leaving, their, like, so you mentioned separating basically the professional and or the work life and the personal life, kind of thing. So I've I think heard this somewhere in a podcast where they said that they just disabled all work emails from their phone, so they never really got a like they never really knew somebody emailed them on their phone, and if it was something really important, they would just call them. And so if
Yeah.
you're on your phone and if that's on your mind, and you're like, okay, I need to check this email, then you have to go back into the office and get that done. But if you never really know you got a notification, it never happens until the next morning when you actually sit at work. And I don't think people don't like, I don't think people get like angry at that, because I think people have started to respect boundaries more and more since we've been working from home. I mean, actually, I think it goes both ways, but at the same time, I think there are people that actually care, and good bosses that actually care about your mental health.
Yeah.
So when I was in the US, that was something that was huge. Since
Yeah.
we weren't coming to the office as much, they were constantly asking us if we were okay, if we needed something, if we needed the resources, if we needed any help with anything that we weren't being able to do at home. Because, when you're at the workplace, there are people that you can ask questions to, a lot easier than texting it or sending it on Slack or something like that. It's a lot more intimidating to actually send a written text, because then you're like, okay, now I see it, and it's something that it's going to stay there. It
Yeah.
becomes a record kind of a thing. But when you ask a question directly with somebody that you're comfortable with at work, I think it
Mhm.
sometimes goes unseen, or like you don't feel as intimidated by it.
Yeah,
um
definitely.
so yeah, definitely, I think segregating those things can help. But let's switch one more gear, and we'll go into, I think, one or two more questions, and then call this the end of the podcast. But
Okay.
something very important. So, what do you think is untraditional with your career path? And why do you think that happened? And again, why do you think that's the right path right now? And where do you want to take that in the future?
Okay. That's like so many parts. Well, there's so many parts to my career path so far. So, I don't know. I just think like being unconventional, like starting out in an internship right after college. I feel like people are always like, "Oh, you can't take an internship after college. Like you're supposed to have a full-time job." Blah blah blah. Like that kind of
That one's
stereotype.
crazy. Yeah.
Like you needing a job.
Yeah.
Um, but like I'm glad I did the internship because if I would have just went ahead and taken a job at that place, I probably wouldn't have been happy.
Hmm.
So I think like starting out with an internship, kind of learning a little bit about like what it is to work in the real world, but like not long term. Like I kind of just like learned about the company, learned about what I was doing, and then like kind of just like got myself into a routine of like a day in the life of working, like
Hmm.
getting up, going, like getting ready, doing a commute, working all day, like packing my lunch and eating lunch at the office, like
Yeah.
just getting myself prepared for that too. I think it was just helpful to have an internship. And then when I started working for the other company that I got my job, like after my internship, like I was enjoying it, I was learning. But like when I finally got to the point where I was like doing stuff on my own and I was, like given the freedom of not working under somebody, like I
Yeah.
was finally at the point where I'm like, I'm doing projects on my own, like I have this creative freedom, like I was taking the lead on projects, like all this stuff. And then COVID hits and that just ruins everything.
Yep.
So for like all my other friends that were working from home already when COVID hit, or like right when COVID hit, everybody's company was like, okay, you're all are working from home, don't come back into the office, whatever. And then my company is still like, yeah, y'all should just still come in every day. I mean, we went to work for like like a month. I don't even know. Probably not a month. Like 2 weeks after everybody else was working from home. So that was very frustrating because I was like,
Yeah.
they're not putting us first because they're thinking about, like, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
We could have had COVID and we could have brought him to the office, but y'all didn't
Yeah.
think about that.
Right.
And so that kind of led me down my untraditional path. Is, you know, I'm what, 6 to 8 months in of working past college, and COVID hits and I got laid off because, you know, like, designers are unfortunately some of the first people who go when situations like this happen, because so that's just the nature of it. But so I got laid off, and that I was never expecting for that to happen to me. And you don't
Yep.
ever expect that to happen to you. And
Mhm.
I just remember sitting in the office, and it was like, you could tell who is making like the walk of shame from the boss's office. Like,
Yeah.
it was happening to so many people. I mean, pretty much my whole office minus like 3 people got laid off, which is like, we
That's
had
good.
different locations. So obviously there's more than 3 people working for the company, but I mean, so many people got laid off, not, I mean, in the world
Yeah.
too, but it's just like something you never expect to deal with. And when it first happened, I was so upset. I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, you go from spending all day working, and then you just wake up and it's just like, what do I do with myself?
Oh no, yeah, it happened to me twice too. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's so
Yeah.
hard. And I think it really takes a hit on your mental health too, because you're
Right.
like, oh, I wasn't needed in that situation. And then it's almost like, I was like, oh, I can take this time to do something I want for myself. Like you said, if you're not going
Yeah.
to do it during COVID, when you had the time, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it was hard because I was just like so focused on like the pressure of finding another job that I
Mhm.
wasn't able to like actually enjoy the time I wasn't working.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that kind of like having that time, I mean, it just made me learn so much about like, I don't even know, like, it just made me grow as a person, because not even really like work wise, well, kind of, I'll get to that point later, but
Yeah.
I just, like, as a person, being confident in yourself and just learning how to get through hard situations like that it's like a blessing in disguise,
Yeah.
because I don't know, like, I feel like it just made me learn a lot about myself. And going into my next job, I just like worked hard when I was laid off and trying to find new jobs, and that was hard because the job market was down. And so it's hard not to get down on yourself and, you know, try to make the best of the situation. And I think like once I got my new job, I was like, that happened for a reason. I don't work at the old company for a reason. Like, I wasn't, like, I was enjoying it, but there were things that I hated about, like, the people I worked with just weren't exactly what I was like looking for in a company. Like, it just, there were things about it that were somewhat like toxic to me, or like just
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy. And I think like being laid off like got me out of that situation. I'm like thankful for it now, because I'm like getting things that I wanted when I was working there now. And I think that's just been like a really important part of my journey, and like being the unconventional things happening to me, because it's just got me to this point. And like, even if this isn't where I want to end up, it's such a step in the right direction, or like just a step in the right direction of me figuring out what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what I want to do still, but I'm at the point where I know what I want and what I don't want. And so
Right.
that's helped me like learn, you know.
Yeah,
So
and that's something I've heard too, it's better to know what you don't want to do. That's a great start, is knowing what you don't want to do, because eventually you'll get to what you do want to do.
exactly.
And that's okay, and we're all kind of in that stage, especially as new people in the industry, 2 to 3 4 years experience, even, I think sometimes is not enough for us to know what we really really want to be doing sometimes. And that is okay. And like I mentioned earlier about the thing, about about the thing that we talked about, is where you just, I guess, if you're not doing it now, you're never going to do it, kind of thing. But I think it's so hard for us as new people in the industry because one, sometimes we don't have the resources or the money to do those things, so if you need a 3D printer, you really don't have the money to buy that just yet.
Like even 3D modeling software is ridiculous. Like,
Exactly, models.
like if your company's not paying for it, your school's not paying for it, like that's a
Yeah,
pretty penny to like
it,
spend
it
on your.
It exactly it hits you right there. And that is why, you start small, I guess. Even if you're doing freelance, you can do freelance while you're working somewhere, but only if
Right,
the company allows you to use their software to do that. So, sometimes they have that in their contracts where you can't really use the software to be doing freelance work,
right,
which can hinder some of that you know mental freedom of saying, okay, this is something that I want to explore. Sometimes you just can't because, hey, you signed a contract. And I guess the companies are okay in a sense of doing that, but also I know that a lot of places want you to learn new things,
yeah,
want you to be doing things that you want to do in your free time, whether that is attending conferences or doing other things, and they'll pay for that, so like you said, you escaped the toxic environment, whether that was the people or not doesn't matter. Sometimes it's just that the people might be fine, but as bosses, they're just not the people that you want to be working for. They're not
right.
the right
That's
mentors.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
they can be great people, but they're just not the people that are going to give you, again, the advice that you're looking for, you know,
Right,
or they're not the people that can help you move in the direction that you want to go into. I mean,
right,
yes, you learn from them, but it's not, if it's not the right things, then sometimes it's not um really what you want, like
yeah.
from life or your job.
And I
So
know
that's
you've
okay.
experienced that too, and it's just sad, like how many times that happens, and like
Yeah.
how many people really are in a situation at work that they don't want to or they don't need to be in.
Yeah.
And I think me taking the time, like when I was unemployed, to figure that out, that was toxic and that's not what I wanted, was so important, because like now I'm like thankful for my boss. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're cool. And he's
Yeah.
just like, he's like, what do you need from me for
Right.
me to be a good boss? And like that's so important. Like if your
Yeah.
boss is asking you what you need and what kind, like he asked me like what kind of boss I want him to be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is not like, why isn't every boss not like that? Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
he kind of like caters to his whole team. Like he's like, hey, do you want me to be hands-on? Like you want me to leave you alone and you just contact me when you need help? Like what kind of, like how much do you want me to be there? How much do you want me checking in? And like, like he sent our whole team $10 Starbucks gift cards because he was like, it's been a busy week, y'all deserve a coffee. I'm like,
That's awesome.
you know, like that's so nice. And like that's
Yeah.
just like the kind of environment you want to be in. Like you want to be supported by your bosses and like people who are above you. And if you're not getting that, like you're not putting yourself to your full potential.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're your own boss, let's say in the future, I think this kind of a situation helps you figure that out too, because you do have to set boundaries for yourself. Again,
Yeah.
you have to figure out what you want to give yourself. Sometimes you just shouldn't be giving yourself too much freedom too. Sometimes you're like, okay, I really shouldn't be watching a movie right now,
Yeah.
so you need to set those goals and timelines and things for yourself. And again, something that I heard on a podcast that I would like to share was that, they said that if you're sometimes you're like, if you're not being productive, it could just be because you're not doing the right thing, or you're not doing what you really want to be doing, and that is why you're feeling like you're not productive. Because like, when you are actually, at least I've experienced that, when I am actually doing something that I really enjoy, I don't know where the time goes, because I'm working on it and it's fine. Like 3 hours pass and I'm like, whoa, I'm not even at the stage I want to be yet, but this was fun, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want our lives to be, going forward, whether that is, working under somebody or working for ourselves. So setting those boundaries is always going to be important. But again, learning early is great. Finding the right people, finding the right connections, and hopefully being able to start your own career. I think that's all of this is going to help. So I'll leave it at that. But where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to get in touch and maybe ask some more questions?
Yeah, I probably, if it's like more career based, like LinkedIn, I'm always open to talk to people. I love like sharing my experience and like answering any questions or like looking at people's portfolios. I've done that. So like that's fun to me
Awesome.
too. So any other designers or anything like that out there, I'd love to do that. Other than that, Instagram, Kenzie Letherby,
Okay.
and my Mackenzie Letherby is like my LinkedIn. And I have Facebook too. So
Hey, I'll put the links in the
it
description.
works.
Yeah, no, I'll put the links in the description for all the formal and informal conversations that somebody might want to have. And this has been great, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
I'm
And
so glad you.
yeah, and I mean, like I said, it's been a while since I did this, and I hope I did okay. Other than that, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, all right, so this is a great place to end this. And again, thank you so much for whoever's listening. Thank you so much, Mackenzie, for coming in and sharing your experience. This is your host, Arjit Singh, and you've been listening to Kadam, the Small Steps podcast. If you found value in this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, let us know how I can make this better. A traditional career is always untraditional. Thanks for listening.